Welcome back for the presentation on siblings and extended family with Bridget Whitlow and Kym Piekunka. Bridget is a licensed psychotherapist that provides therapy for adolescents and adult individuals, couples, families and groups. Bridget has clinical expertise in the treatment of anxiety, eating disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, LGBTQ and self-criticism. She is trained in multiple treatment modalities, including family-based mortuary therapy, cognitive behaviour therapy, exposure and responsive prevention, mindful self-compassion and compassion-focused therapy. Throughout her clinical training, Bridget has been actively involved in research projects and worked as one of the lead clinicians at UCSD Eating Disorders Treatment and Research Program on multi-site MIMH study that compared two types of family therapy for adolescents with anorexia. Since 2018, Bridget has been collaborating with Kym to study and develop wellness resources for individuals that have a sibling experiencing an eating disorder. Bridget and Kym developed a sibling needs survey that has reached over 500 siblings around the globe and are currently creating support systems-based research from their survey data. Kym is a Special Projects Coordinator for F.E.A.S.T and the owner of the advocacy site kymadvocates.com, providing connection and resources to well siblings. Kym is incoming co-chair for the Academy of Eating Disorders Expert by Experience Committee and serves on the Scientific Program Committee. In 2018, we had that survey developed with Bridget. There's something else I wanted to say here. Kym currently speaks to siblings, parents, carers and clinicians to bring the sibling experience to light and develop sibling-focused support systems and coping strategies. So, ladies, I'll hand over to you. I would appreciate it if you could just start off with something about you that people might not know, that is not from your professional career. And Kym, I know you sent me something, so I apologise for losing it. But if we could start off with that, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Gordon.
Kym, thank you, Gordon. You want to start, Kym?
I sure will. Let's see, what is my strange thing or my fun thing? I'm an inline skater. I used to compete in inline skating. That's my fun little piece of personal note. How about you?
So I recently learned how to make roasted salsa, and the recipe calls for 1 habanero, but I like a lot of heat, so I use 2. So every time I go to the grocery store, the produce people are always like, "Oh, you're making your salsa." That's my big thing. And Gordon, I hope we get to hear an interesting fact about you maybe before the next meeting. That would be great.
I agree. All right. So.
I can do that. I will. That's fair enough. I'm asking all the speakers to do it, so I will chip in at some point and do that. Thank you.
Great.
All right. Okay, so you guys, thank you so much for coming today. We are really thrilled to be here. This is our 3rd year presenting, and each year we just hear from parents and carers that they want to know more, they want to know where resources are, they want to know how to help, and we are thrilled to present our survey findings and all that we've learned just speaking from different siblings for Bridget in her clinical practice, and she normally speaks to younger siblings. And for me, I just get calls looking for help, and it's mostly siblings 18 and older, all the way up to 55. So we're excited to share our presentation, and we're assuming that there are siblings, parents and carers, maybe a few clinicians, and if there's anybody else, grandparents or anybody else out there, this is definitely for you. So with that, Bridget, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Well, I just want to say thank you again to F.E.A.S.T for having us. I feel very honored to be in this group, and it's been a pleasure to be part of Feast of Knowledge since its inception a few years ago. And I just want to say a disclaimer, I'm not related to F.E.A.S.T. I don't have any financial commitments or any crossover there, just in private practice. And we have our poll popping up. So if you take a moment and just answer that, that would be really helpful to let us know who's with us. And Kym, do you want to say a little bit more on your end?
Yes, this poll, I'm just going to push this poll a little bit. We're not trying to invade your privacy. We can't see who you are if you take the poll. We just want to know who our audience is, because there's a lot to cover, and we'd love to speak to the sibling if you're out there, and to parents and carers if you're out there too. And if we've grandparents or aunts and uncles, it just helps us to know who you are. So go ahead and fill that out. For me, I do work for F.E.A.S.T, and F.E.A.S.T is one of the reasons that F.E.A.S.T moms encouraged me to speak on the sibling role. And I'll share a little bit more about how that looks, how that came about in my story, and why it changed my life really in the trajectory of hopefully the sibling experience and sibling care. So with that said, let's jump in. And Bridget's going to share a little bit about our survey.
Yes. So Kym and I actually got connected, I believe, in 2017. I think we had our paths had crossed a little bit before then. But JD, who is also part of F.E.A.S.T and is a parent advocate down at UCSD, connected both of us because she knew I was doing a lot of family-based treatment and feeling that the siblings were just kind of left out there a little bit, they were brought in to how to support, but not necessarily getting the support they needed in that situation. And JD said, oh, you have to meet Kym. Kym is a huge sibling advocate. And so we connected then, and we just put our heads together and decided to create a anonymous survey so we could learn, like, what do siblings need, outside of, Kym's experience and my experience. What are the things that are needed so that we could help develop needed resources and also help point academics and researchers in the way to develop things that are evidence-based for siblings. And so we put out our 28 question survey in February of 2018. And we closed it earlier this year, and we ended up getting 543 responses from around the world. The method was SurveyMonkey, and we mostly put it out through social media means. So Facebook, Twitter, Kym, you might have done Instagram. I did a lot of therapist listservs and getting the word out in that way. And we were thrilled with the responses, ranging in age from 9 years old all the way to 70 years old. And around the world, Australia, US, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Greece, Ireland. I mean, it was amazing, the responses that we got. And, Kym and I are not academics. We are not housed within that institution. So, this is really an exploratory survey that we are just using to help guide the way for us to provide good resources, and then also for academics to study further. Just a little more on the survey, about 82% of the respondents were female. Or identified as female, and 17% identified as male, 1% identified as gender nonconforming. 92% reported that they had a sister that was experiencing an eating disorder or had experienced an eating disorder. 6% said they had a male sibling with an eating disorder, and 2% said that their sibling was gender nonconforming. One of the most striking things, I think, is that 47% reported that they themselves recognized that the eating disorder was going on first. Like, they were the ones that noticed something was amiss before parents noticed or before, professionals noticed. So I think that's very, very important. And then just a couple other pieces about it. 12% of those that did respond said they were in family therapy. And of those 12%, 17% said they were in family-based treatment. And then I'd say another striking piece of it was that we got from a lot of siblings was that the survey itself was the first time that they had been asked about their own experience, and that doing their survey was very emotional and supportive to them. So Kym, I don't know if you want to add any more on that piece.
Yes, the only other piece I'd highlight in that is that we did leave it open much longer than we intended because of that reason. It was very emotional. Some of these responses were very emotional. And from the 60s, the 60 and 70-year-old comments, it was the first time anybody had recognized their experience. These were 60-year-old, 70-year-old people who was the first time they were acknowledged. So I think that's just very powerful, and you'll hear more of that theme throughout this discussion. And yes, there was a question. We will answer those questions, I promise.
So yes, over these questions, when we pulled out, again, we're not researchers, so we didn't have a method necessarily that's been validated by studies, but we drew 4 main themes from this. And the 4 themes that we're going to share and that we found was acknowledgement of the sibling experience, communication with the sibling, skills and how to, and then also finding support and therapy and therapeutic experiences for the sibling. Kym, I know you're going to take the next step here.
Yes. Okay. So acknowledgement. This was probably one of the biggest things we heard throughout the survey from most siblings. And acknowledgement is defined as wanting to be seen, wanting their experience to be heard and acknowledged at all. There's a deep pain in this, as I understand there's a qualification often. I understand how hard this is. I'm watching my parents work very hard. I'm very scared for my sister, and I wish that I counted in this. So there's constantly a clarification and a qualification of, I know this is really hard, and hello, can anyone see me? And some people are angry and say, I would like to be seen. I would like to be acknowledged. I wish someone understood the pain. And the pain that they're feeling in that acknowledgement, they wanted people to know they're lonely, that some of them have to get themselves to school. Some of them have to do things all by themselves. These are young kids, and all the way later, even my experience did not get acknowledged as a child and still doesn't today. And there's carried pain through that. And we'll talk a little bit about how that impacts the family relationships at the end. And I apologize, my voice is going a little bit. I was a COVID person, and this is the effects for me. So I apologize. It's starting to get gravelly, and I'm sorry. Feelings. There's a lot of mixed and confusing feelings, especially for younger siblings. And they don't know how to process that or how to deal with, I feel really scared and really sad that my brother has this eating disorder, and I hate him at the same time. And I miss my mom and dad and wish they'd pay attention to me. And they wanted to know that they were still okay, and things were going to be okay, but they felt invisible. Mental health issues coming up, depression, disordered eating, their own eating disorder being ignored, anxiety, maybe self-harm, those types of things coming up, and they felt like they were just dismissed because it wasn't as bad as the eating disorder. So very frightening things for them, a bit angry about it, hurt by it, and not knowing where to go from our survey to get help with that. Communication is another big one, and that came in all different forms. And communication, they wanted to be part of what was happening. And the first thing I would say on that is parents often didn't want to tell the sibling what was going on, in the hope, in the good intention of, oh my gosh, I'm going to keep them from this pain. Well, as Bridget reported, we found that siblings often are the ones that know about the eating disorder prior to anybody else. So they already are aware of what's happening, and it's very scary for them. Or they're trying to communicate, hey, this is what's going on, and they're not being believed. That communication of not being believed is really difficult. So when it's being hidden from them, or everything's fine, they know something is not fine. And if they're too little and haven't seen the eating disorder, they sense what's going on in the family, and it's quite painful for them because they're hearing one thing and seeing something else. And that's more scary. I can tell you from personal experience, that is far more frightening than knowing the truth, because you're guessing and you're making up things in your head. we'll go into communication and how to help the sibling in a second. But one of the things that came up is not telling the whole truth either, and keeping pieces away from siblings, and that being distressing for the sibling because they're kind of questioning. I again fall into that category, and it was extremely stressful. Communication about your own feelings and what's going on for you. Siblings wanted to know, one of the things siblings do is they protect their parents. They don't want to be the last problem that breaks the foundation of the house. They're very afraid that that foundation is going to get cracked if they say, hey, I have feelings, or I'm worried about your marriage, or I'm scared about this. And one of the things that can be really helpful is the communication that you are scared too, that I'm having feelings about this. They kind of wanted to hear what's going on. Communication seemed to die for them, and they're left to the side and feeling very alone and very isolated and terrified. So communication being a very big desire for them, wanting to know what's going on. And finally, I'll leave with this. They want to know what their role is. What's their place? Where do they belong in this scenario? And as we'll talk a little bit later, codependent behaviors, enmeshment, and all can come in if they don't have boundaries of those roles or any set roles or where they belong. That can be extremely distressing, and we'll discuss more on that later. I will let you finish with the last two, Bridget.
Yeah, I'd love to share some quotes that came through under the knowledge and skills theme, and then also in the support and therapy theme. So one respondent said, I wish I knew about it sooner so I knew why my sister was sad all the time. I wish there was a class for siblings so we know how to help and what to say and what not to say. And I hear this all the time in family therapy. And hopefully Kym and I will be having some sibling groups coming up, but currently there aren't any that are available. Another quote was, I wish I was allowed to understand better, but my sibling won't let me. I'm sure many families have heard this because this is also a very big theme that I see in family-based treatment, where there's a lot of rage about involving the other siblings and having them know about exactly what's going on. And then another quote is, I don't always know what to say and or how to handle the harder moments she experiences. So those are the themes that come up in the knowledge section. And then some of the quotes that came up for us and that are themes in the support and therapy section. I needed and still need help with dealing with feelings of helplessness. I also blamed myself for not helping her with her eating. If she wasn't eating. If I was frustrated at mealtime, she would get upset and refuse to eat. That caused tension between my mother and myself. Another theme we see. Another person responded that said they just needed someone who will listen to them. And another statement was, I wish there was more support for siblings while our sibling received treatments. Parents are often involved, and I felt forgotten in my sister's treatment team. I would have also enjoyed individual counseling. So Kym, with that, I would love to hand it over to you to talk about your experience and process of healing.
When I had met Bridget, I still was resistant to speak about my experience. Welcome to the sibling experience. Working for F.E.A.S.T and being surrounded by moms and clinicians and, AED, all the researches and so forth. One of the things I see all the time is this wonderful support. You've got around the dinner table at F.E.A.S.T. I know in our work with volunteers, parent-to-parent support is constant and beautiful and wonderful. And just in this session, oh my gosh, Lucine is talking about all these tips and things to help with trauma, and Laura and Sapatli, everybody, Dr. Katzman talking about it's very distressful, it's very hard on you, it's very hard for you. And I sit as a sibling going, gosh, it would be nice if we had that. I still think that. So when I share my story, it is not to be dramatic or to have a sad story shared. It's to educate, because we have no voice. We have no voice out there to express to researchers, to clinicians, to parents, how desperate the need is to have support systems in place and to have the tips, the tools, and the resources age appropriate and with the varying different problems that come up. So I'm going to share my story, not to terrify you, but to give you some hope, because Bridget and I both really believe there are some basic things that can be implemented to assist siblings right now. You can take them today. My sister, Casey, was bulimic for over 15 years, but she also struggled with binge eating disorder. And I was the sibling who knew first. And it did not come with behaviors. It came with her, not with eating disorder behaviors. It came with her personality change. We were best of friends, and she became a very angry, very hostile person quickly and very defiant. That was what was scary for me most. The binge purge came in a little bit later for me, and I saw that as validation, but I kind of knew it was happening. And it was very scary. I was around, I was 10 when her personality started to change, and she was still in her binge eating phase, eating disorder. Probably not diagnosable, but beginning. It was really beginning, and food was around her a lot. I look back and know that now. At the time, I didn't know. And she was in a much bigger body than we normally would say, oh, look, she's anorexic. At the time, it was Karen Carpenter and all of that. So when I went to my parents, they were like, what are you talking about? She's fine. And my teacher said, she's fine. She's fine. It's a phase. She'll be fine. Her friends and me did not believe that. We saw the decline quickly, and it was frightening. Not being heard and not being considered a reasonable or reliable source was achingly painful for me. I didn't know where to take it, and my friends didn't know what to do, so I stopped talking about it with them. Eventually, when my sister, her bulimia became much more severe, it was a source of shame from the clinical, side of things, and my parents were extremely blamed, and that filtered down to me and to my brother, and we were not to talk about it, so I did not talk about it with my friends. And all the while, from 10 until I would say at this point 18, I was trying to figure out the guilt for not getting her help. I was trying to figure out how to help her. I was trying to figure out where she went. I missed her fiercely. I missed her so much. We fought all the time. I tried to talk to my parents, and our communication broke off because they were tired of me coming to them. And my whole world was falling apart, and I had nowhere to go and no one to talk to about that. And it was terrifying. So I just became the good kid to make life easy. And the hardest part for me at that point was that people were praising me for being, oh, thank God they have you, Kym. Thank God they have you. And my parents would say, honey, you're so strong. Thanks for taking this on. Honey, thanks for just, I know she did that to you, but can you just, it's okay because she's so ill and you're strong. And well-intentioned words, but how I interpret them was, I have to be good. I have to be the good kid, or I won't get loved. I won't get attention. I won't have anything left. So I got on the outside better and better, and I was the teacher's pet, and I did sports and all the things, and just became this good kid. And I felt this tear within me because inside I was raging angry and very depressed. And the more people told me I was good, the more I hated myself because I knew it wasn't true. I didn't know who I was. I was so split. So when I went to college, I was taken away from the only thing that I was about. My whole world was my sister. And I crumbled and became clinically depressed and anxious and self-harming. And I was hospitalized 6 times for depression. And yet I never brought her up. I didn't feel like it was my place. I wouldn't connect the two. I didn't have any idea how to talk about that. And I don't remember a lot of my college years. I was in trauma. And then I kind of I got some therapy and moved on and tried to just have a life, but there was just something missing. There was something wrong because I never coped or dealt with the feelings I had. And when my sister passed in 2002, it was the third part of my grief because I had lost her as my best friend. I lost the hope of her, and then I lost her, and I had PTSD. Diagnosed PTSD, but I just ignored it because I didn't want to traumatize my parents. I didn't want to bring it into my marriage. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know how to talk about it. I had nothing to figure out. And so I started to go to advocacy days and educate myself about eating disorders because I had gone to the bookstore as a ritual from the minute I could drive every week to look for a book, to look for a story that talked about bulimia and binge eating disorder because she was not like the anorexic stuff I read. And I looked for a sibling story and I left in tears every single time. I felt like I had nothing. I had nothing to hold on to. So I will conclude with, that's a pretty dramatic story. I understand that. But when you're a child or you are a sibling, I dedicate this to you. You survive it, and then you have to cope with it if you don't have help. So there is we can do a lot to avoid lack of education, lack of feeling heard, lack of support, lack of emotional support, how teaching kids how to deal with what's going on at home and being at school and having to have a life. All those things are really, really difficult. And they're starting at 9 and 12 and 14. They're not parents. They are not parents. They are kids, and they don't have life experience to pull from. So there's a lot of hope. But I used to apologize for my story. And I guess I will say this. It's important that you know how traumatizing. I hear from siblings now 3 times a week, and it's the same story. Whether they're 50, 40, 30, 18, they just feel all the things I just discussed. So we need to hear the story so that we can acknowledge it and then resolve it. And we'll talk a little bit now on how for carers and for parents, grandparents too, what you can do to answer all the things that I just talked about, and move forward. I think I'm first.
We do have you in the queue to talk first.
So, communication. A lot of things would have been helpful for me with just basic communication. And then I will read some of the questions. Bridget, we have a lot of questions in here. So one of the biggest things that my parents did, my mom, in fact, and I have this conversation all the time, is that she wanted to protect me from what was happening with my sister, because my sister had co-occurring issues too. Stealing and drug addiction and alcoholism and all that on top, with it. And we didn't know it was connected at the time. So they sheltered me from that, but I knew it was going on. And I wish that they had sat down and told me the truth. And they said, this is hard for us. This is challenging for us. Let's talk about this. And just had a discussion about it as a family. We didn't have that discussion, or it was qualified. Now I know this is really hard for you, but your sister's sick, which meant this is hard for you, but I can't handle this. That's how I interpreted it. Any qualifications, I realized I had no freedoms to talk. There was not a safe place for me there. So being open and honest, age appropriate, developmentally appropriate for that child, without scaring them. They're already scared. That's the problem. They already see you guys fighting, the looks that you're sharing. They see the behaviors. They see the change in personality. They see it all. They're living with them. They watch it happen. So communication is really important. Communication can be simple too. You do not have to sit down in a formal conversation. I heard this beautiful story from a mom who said, we used to call the eating disorder Voldemort for you. And this is apropos, Bridget and I were just talking about this. Voldemort, for those of you who do not know, is the evil character in Harry Potter. And so they used this, this dark character to explain the eating disorder. And she would just, sit with him in bed and say, how was your experience with Voldemort today? And they would chat back and forth with each other 5 minutes, but it was extremely bonding, and they would laugh and bond and cry and express their feelings together. And that did what? That gave that child a role, that gave a child a place in the family, communication, knew it was okay to feel scared and to feel bad, heard from the mom that it was hard, she's going to be okay. All that modeling was happening for that child. And there was a place to talk about it. It wasn't shame, pulled the stigma away. So important. Let's see. And communication too, with what is your role? I was such the adult in the family, especially when my parents wouldn't deal with it. I was lecturing my sister. I was yelling at her. I was pleading with her. I was doing all those things. I had no boundaries set with me on that. I was finding her treatment centers. I was finding her all sorts of things. I was pulling her out of treatment centers, setting roles for the child. And they need to be withheld. They need to be held up, and they need to be strict so that the sibling knows how far they can go and what their role is, and it gives them safety. Are we over?
No, but we have, Kym, just as a time check, we're at 13 minutes left. So I'm thinking maybe once you say a few things, then I can just drop in, then we can do Q&A since there's a lot.
Go. Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to finish up, or should I jump in?
Jump in.
Okay. So I was just going to say, I wanted to underscore what Kym is talking about in terms of communication, with the caveat that what I often hear and what also comes through in the survey is that parents can sometimes be lean on the siblings also for emotional support, which makes sense because there's just so much going on. But I would say it's really important for when the siblings have communication, it's about that they're not to blame. They're seeking treatment. They don't have to take over in that regard, and that they're safe and they can have a space where it is all about them. They're not hearing, I can't remember if this was, we heard this in a talk, or Kym, maybe you mentioned it, but there was a parent, one of the kids got their driver's license, and one of the parents said, "Oh, good, you can drive so-and-so to their medical appointments now. Great." And it wasn't even celebrated that this person just met a major milestone in their own lives, and it was going to be about their own independence, which is so key during teen years. So that's what I just want to underscore. And then I also, as a family-based treatment provider, I also want to say siblings do not need to be eating the same meal plan that the person that's in recovery does. This is very important. It's really important to model that everybody has their own needs. And yes, like Laura said, the velociraptor or whatever dinosaur, I can't remember, is going to come out at that moment and say, well, so-and-so doesn't have that. I'm eating more than dad. But it's incredibly important to really model that we all have our own needs, and that's their medicine, and that's what their sibling needs for their own bodies. Because that sibling also needs to learn how to listen to their own needs and hunger and fullness. So, okay, I'm going to end there so that we can answer some of the questions. I haven't been able to keep up, so I don't know if Kym or Gordon.
I can read.
Oh, great.
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Hi, guys. Look, I've been monitoring the questions, and we've got a number, as you said. Let's see how many of them we can get through. So one that came in before the session I thought might be pertinent. And I'll just read this out to you. We've asked my son not to discuss his sister's condition with his friends as we are trying to maintain her privacy, but feel like we're cutting off an outlet of support for him, or maybe adding to the stigmatism of mental illness. How can we make sure his needs are met? Interesting question, this. It comes up, this issue around privacy. Is privacy a good idea? And what about the support for the other child?
Yes, I'll respond to that. I hear this question over and over, and it's such a delicate question because, of course, the sibling has needs to have support, and then also, it is somebody's pretty intense experience what they're going through. So the way that I usually address it with the family is taught, like really taught. I mean, we might spend 1, 2, 3 meetings talking really about this, like how can we do this? How can we be respectful? So I can't say there's a one size fits all. I noticed really briefly in a comment, someone said that they did family therapy in addition to family-based treatment, and that might be a option. It, it's you kind of have to figure out what's going to work for your family, but I think it's safe to assume to not isolate it, right? Eating disorders thrive in isolation. Kym, do you want to add anything?
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say too, if the choice is that they can't express that with their friends, to have a discussion about that, because that says shame. And they have to keep a secret from their friends. That's very difficult to navigate. Very difficult to navigate. How do you bring friends home? How do you, you're having a bad day, you can't talk about it. You're supposed to lie to your friends. That's challenging on the sibling side, the needs there. So it is delicate. And I think you have to have really honest conversations in your family about that. Again, back to communication.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions about having younger siblings, and I think I'm inferring from the tone of the question, I hope I got this right, I mean quite young, we're concerned about younger siblings eating with the person with the illness, with the eating disorder, and the distress that may cause younger siblings. How do you protect younger siblings from, this is my language, but the distress or trauma type events that may occur at the meal table? How would you like to handle that one?
Kym, do you want to go first? I went first on the last one, but
you see this in your practice.
Okay.
So
yeah. So, this really comes back to, in setting up some kind of system where if it does get to be too much, maybe, and this doesn't work for everybody, sometimes that's just one parent managing, but if there's a tag team situation where, okay, one parent's going to go out with the younger sibling and do something, maybe finish the meal outside or something like that. Again, I mean, I'm sorry, there's no one direct answer, but it's setting it up to figure out how can we manage it the best we can, because the distress and trauma is already there. They're going to know something's happening, but there are situations where it becomes pretty volatile, and so it may be best to have that person, if possible, eat with somebody else or have another parent go out to dinner. Really, it's a creative effort and strategizing on the team to figure ways to manage that.
Thank you. Do either of you want to comment on the commonly advice, which I understand is in the FBT manual, around having mealtime together as a family and involving siblings in distraction activities for the person with the illness? So this can you sort of help balance those 2 points of view there?
Kym, you want to take it or you want me to take it? I mean...
I'll answer from my experience. That could not have worked in my house because I would have had a plate thrown at me. So that was extremely, when I answer raw because that's the experience, that is the experience. And remember too, and I like to say this a lot to parents, a lot of siblings at that age are coming from, this isn't fair for me. Why do I have to deal with this? And that's their frame of mind. They're not a parent. They're not coming from, oh, we need to do this as the help. So for me, if I had food thrown at me or that got the finger, which was frequent, or for me, that just was so traumatizing that I don't know that it would have worked for our family. So I would say you have to listen to the sibling.
Okay.
I just want to add, I would absolutely agree with that. It's like whatever works for the family, just like what Laura said, what works for one person or one family isn't going to work for another family. So it definitely is a creative effort. I've seen families where, I mean, they really get into some really long, some great games and they love it. And, and then there's families, what Kym is talking about, like that would not fly whatsoever. So it's figuring that out, but primarily listening to the siblings and what they can do.
And thank you. Looking at what I'm hearing there is it is creative and it is individual and situational. And I'm also hearing there about showing a balance of respect for the needs of the person with the eating disorder as well as the needs of the siblings. So I hope I'm paraphrasing that fairly closely.
Right on, Gordon.
Thank you. Okay. The next question that's come in is, what if the sibling also suffers with an eating disorder and add some words and is triggered by the first child? There's a second part to that question about what support is available, but I think the crux of the question is, what do you do if the sibling also has an eating disorder and is being triggered by the behaviour of the child? I'm going to make an assumption in this question. It sounds like one of the sibling may be in a better stage of recovery and isn't being treated with food as aggressively, perhaps, as the child who's more unwell. Can you help with that, please?
We hear that. That's in our survey, left and right, that, okay, my sister had an eating disorder. Now I have one. It's not as bad, so I'm ignored. That's common. I heard that came through a lot. Or disordered eating came through. And then Bridget, go ahead and answer the second half.
Well, I was just going to say I've had that situation where, somebody is in a different stage and, I hate to repeat myself, but it's really creative. We worked with the team. So I wasn't part of that other person's process. So they had their own treatment team. And so we decided that we were going to keep things separate. But that was just for that family. I've also worked with siblings that are twins that both are struggling with the same thing. And, we've kept it all together, and so it really kind of depends on the capacity, resources, what's going on. And again, Gordon, I like how you said that, balancing the respect between the person struggling and the sibling, but somehow figuring out how to move forward together with either a shared team or separate team. It's a lot.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and we've got a few, but we'll get through a couple more. So for those participants watching this, we'll let this go till 5 past the hour again. The situation with the sibling school, the attendee cited the fact where the school wasn't understanding what was going on for the sibling because they didn't know what was going on at home with the sibling being unwell, and their grades suffered, their studies suffered. Any suggestions about how to assist the sibling in the school engagement?
I'm going to jump in really quickly on this one. One thing that's worked with some of my families is having the pediatrician write a very vague letter about need for support, and talking with the parents and myself talking with either the school counselor or someone else in the system to figure out how to best support the sibling at school. Those are two strategies that have I've seen be successful. Kym, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think there has to be some communication within the school system, or they'll just I just worked with a school last year where that happened, and there was bullying and all sorts of things that went on. So communication on some level with the school, I'd recommend. I actually like that. I hadn't heard that, Bridget. I like that from the doctor, because then it's more official and they don't have to.
Yes, and the pediatricians I work with are very, they say there's a medical condition that's causing significant, impediment, and that's kind of about it. And that's that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another question here from Lucy. My daughter, now 18, has had an ED for 4 years. Her sibling, now 20, has had a mild ED. So we were not able to talk freely to her about her sister, as it could have been triggering. do you have advice for this situation?
So talking, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kym.
I don't think you have to talk about the actual eating disorder behaviors that would be triggering. It's more about the communication about feelings and how are you experiencing this and are you all right? You know, getting into just what's your experience? How are you? Quick questions, you know, and it doesn't have to be a lecture or a sit down formal thing, but just a check-in and, you know, so it doesn't have to be focused on the other eating disorder so they aren't triggered by each other or know the behaviors that are going on. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Bridget, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's okay.
Thank you. Here's one, and I'm really pleased for those watching that we're getting questions about adults with eating disorder and how parents can assist with that. A lot of discussion, understandably, is with adolescents and younger children. But of course, we know eating disorders are impacting people at all ages. So here's the question. My son and daughter are young adults who should live in a different state to me. My daughter is the one with the eating disorder. My son now has a very serious girlfriend who does not understand the eating disorder. This seems to be a wedge in their relationship. As a mum, this is really hard to watch as he is her support. Any suggestions on how I can intervene?
It's a great question. Kym, do you want to take that first?
I know it's a great question when a presenter throws it to the other presenter, don't you? You have to think about it.
I didn't speak to my parents, so for a year after my sister passed, any distress that has happened, right? And you've got now this other person involved and all of that. And I hate to be boring again. These are not fun answers, but you have to talk. You have to give him space because, again, as the sibling, he's being asked, can you just understand this? Can you get her to do this? And he's in the middle of this, right? I think it's sitting down and having a conversation and how you guys are going to handle it, how it's going to be dealt with at holidays and at dinners. It's talking and being creative within the family. Every family's different. And every pain is different. There's a lot of anger sometimes, or there's a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, or maybe he doesn't want to deal with it anymore and he just wants a couple of years with her. I don't know what the scenario is, but I think it's sitting down with the family and talking about how you're going to handle that because it can be really hurtful. My ex-husband was the one who told my family, we're not coming anymore if this continues. I had that same scenario. And it shook my family up. It was very painful. We had to sit down as a family and have it out and discuss how that was going to look. Not an easy answer, but you have to decide together.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly, it depends on the relationship. So, because it's sounding like the mom is concerned that her son isn't getting the support he needs from his significant other. And so I think, giving that person education, and whether that comes from her son or from her, that's, I don't know if the mom's able to have that relationship and say, hey, these are great things to learn. It helped me, then that would be great. Or if this person would hear it better from her son, I don't know. But it sounds like just providing some trusted resources could be really beneficial.
Fantastic, thank you. And we'll make this the last question. It is quite lengthy in its wording. I'll read it through. When I spoke to my son about his sister who was diagnosed with anorexia at age 12, he was devastated and said, "This is my final year of school and it is really important to me to do well." I told him that we would be doing FBT and I was sure he would be included and that it would be okay because the professionals knew what he would need. During FBT, there was never a time that the therapist would see him alone, but always just seemed to want to find out how things are going at home. Needless to say, when he went to uni in another city, things fell apart and is now back home working and still quite all over the place. He is seeing a professional for an addiction problem at the moment, but I don't think he has mentioned that his sister has an eating disorder. In short, would you recommend that I contact the professional, as my son does not seem to think that his sister's anorexia plays a part in this problem?
So contact the therapist, the son's therapist. Is that right, Gordon?
That's the question. So there is it sounds, I'm reading there, the son has an addiction problem now and is seeing a therapist for that.
Okay.
The parent is asking, should they contact the son's therapist directly and let them know about the siblings' eating disorder?
So from a therapist point of view, I welcome input from people that are close to whoever I might, if I'm seeing somebody individually. And I just want you to, we can't call you back or respond if we don't have a signed release in place. But I appreciate getting information like that because it gives me more information other than what I get. And so then it can lead to bigger discussions. So I'll leave it at that. Kym, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, yeah, I think it's great to contact them. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Look, ladies, thank you very much.